In April 1945, the world witnessed the final breaths of the most feared regime of the modern era. An empire that promised to last 1,000 years collapsed in a matter of days. Cities burned, millions of soldiers surrendered, leaders fled or faced brutal fates, while in the heart of Berlin, final decisions were being made that would change the course of humanity forever. What happened in those last days was not just the end of a war, but the total collapse of an entire era. In the final months of the war, Allied forces advanced rapidly on every front. In April 1945 alone, about 1.5 million German soldiers were captured on the Western Front, while another 800,000 were taken prisoner by the Soviet Army in the East. In Italy, an additional 120,000 German troops surrendered. Improvised camps were created to hold the massive number of prisoners as the German military completely lost its ability to continue fighting. In Northern Europe, the last German forces were expelled from Finland, retreating toward Norway. The end of the war also sealed the fate of the Axis leaders. On April 27, 1945, Italian dictator Benito Mussolini was captured by the Italian resistance while attempting to escape. The following day, he was executed, and his body was publicly displayed in Milan, symbolizing the definitive collapse of Italian fascism. A few days later, in a Berlin surrounded by the Red Army, Adolf Hitler realized defeat was inevitable. On May 30, 1945, he committed suicide in his bunker alongside Eva Braun, whom he had married less than 2 days earlier. Before his death, he appointed Admiral Karl Donitz as his successor, even as the Third Reich effectively ceased to exist. Even before Hitler's death, several German forces were already negotiating surrender. In Italy, approximately 1 million German soldiers laid down their arms on May 2nd. On the same day, the Battle of Berlin ended with the city surrendering to Soviet forces, marking the end of organized resistance in the Nazi capital. German units in the north also began surrendering to Western Allied forces, making it clear that the war was lost. In the following days, German surrender spread in a domino effect. Troops capitulated in the Netherlands, Denmark, and northwestern Germany. Forces stationed in Bavaria surrendered to American troops, while high-ranking Nazi officials, including Hermann Göring, were captured. Isolated cities continued to fall, and even the German submarine fleet received orders to cease offensive operations, signaling the definitive end of Germany's military power. On May 7, 1945, in the French city of Reims, General Alfred Jodl signed the unconditional surrender of all German forces before the Allies. The agreement ordered a complete cessation of military operations at 23:01 on May 8. The following day, another document was signed in Berlin before the Soviet Union, officially confirming surrender on all fronts. The war in Europe was over. On May 8, 1945, crowds filled the streets of cities such as London, Paris, and New York to celebrate the end of the conflict. The date became known as Victory in Europe Day. Due to time zone differences, the Soviet Union celebrated victory on May 9th, a tradition still observed today in several Eastern European countries. Even after the official surrender, some German units continued fighting for days or weeks. Pockets of resistance in Czechoslovakia were only defeated by May 11th, while isolated garrisons surrendered gradually across different regions. The last battle in Europe ended on May 20, 1945, and a small German unit isolated in the Arctic did not surrender until September. World War II in Europe left more than 60 million dead and deep scars across the globe, becoming the bloodiest conflict in human history. The fall of Berlin, Hitler's suicide, and Germany's surrender marked the end of the Nazi regime and the beginning of a new world order. However, although the war had ended in Europe, the conflict would continue in the Pacific for several more months before the world would finally see peace restored.